Station Prometheus was the kind of place that made you feel inadequate just by existing in its general vicinity. Floating in the neutral zone between 7 different star systems, it housed the Galactic Combat Academy, where the elite of the elite came to learn how to stylishly stab each other within the bounds of interstellar law. Jake Hendricks was having a pretty good day, all things considered. Sure, he was the only human in Advanced Dueling Techniques 401, and sure, every single one of his classmates looked like they could personally end his bloodline without breaking a sweat. But he'd gotten his coffee right that morning, so things were looking up. "Students, take your positions," Commander Threll announced, his 4 mantis-like arms gesturing dramatically to the dueling circles laid out across the training floor. Threll was approximately 7 feet of chitinous green exoskeleton, wrapped in what Jake could only describe as a military uniform, designed by someone who'd never seen a human before and wasn't about to start now. "This semester, you will learn the sacred art of blade combat as practiced by the civilized species of our great alliance." Jake hefted his duffel bag and tried not to make eye contact with anyone. This strategy lasted approximately 4 seconds. "Oh look, the mammal brought luggage," Sarthak hissed from across the room. The reptilian was all scales and superiority complex, with a crest that apparently indicated he was from some important noble house that Jake absolutely did not care about. "Did you pack a lunch, pink skin? Perhaps some primitive fermented beverages to soothe your inevitable humiliation?" "Just my gear, sass," Jake replied, deliberately mangling the pronunciation. "It is Sarthak, as you well know." Silence," Threll interrupted, which Jake appreciated because he was running out of diplomatic ways to tell a 6-foot lizard to shut up. "You will each be issued a standard training saber. These weapons are calibrated to your species' physiological capabilities and are completely non-lethal. They utilize holographic scoring matrices to determine successful strikes." The other students moved forward to collect their weapons from the rack. There was Kijget, an insectoid with reflexes that made hummingbirds look sluggish. Norval, a floating crystal being that could apparently see 3 seconds into the future, which seemed like cheating, but nobody had asked Jake's opinion. And about 15 other beings, each more anatomically confusing than the last. Jake stayed where he was, quietly unzipping his duffel bag. "Human Hendricks," Threll said, mandibles clicking with what might have been concern. "You require a training saber." "Nah, I'm good, thanks," Jake said, pulling out a long, wrapped bundle. The room went quiet in that special way that means someone is about to do something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, and the smart money is on stupid. "You are not good," Threll insisted, his voice taking on that particular tone that universal translators render as barely contained exasperation. "You cannot participate without proper equipment." "Oh, I've got proper equipment, Commander." Jake carefully unwrapped the cloth, revealing 3 feet of polished steel that caught the overhead lights and reflected them with the kind of gleam that said this blade had been maintained with religious devotion. "This is a longsword. Been in my family for 4 generations. Grandpa Hendricks used it to open letters and intimidate door-to-door salesmen. Dad let me borrow it for the semester." The silence somehow got louder. "That is a sharpened blade," Threll said slowly, as if explaining this to a particularly dim child. "An actual weapon designed to cause permanent physical harm." "Yep," Jake agreed cheerfully. "This class uses training sabers." "The syllabus said bring a bladed weapon suitable for dueling," Jake countered. "This bad boy was literally designed for judicial duels in medieval Europe. I'd argue it's the most suitable weapon in the room." Sarthak's laugh could have stripped paint. "The primitive brings a primitive weapon. How fitting. That relic will be useless against modern combat techniques." Jake looked at the training saber in Sarthak's clawed hand, then at his own very real, very sharp longsword. "You know what? You might be right. Guess we'll find out." Commander Threll's antennae were doing something that probably indicated an impending stress migraine. "This violates approximately 47 safety protocols." "Does it violate any actual rules?" Jake asked innocently. Threll's mandibles worked silently for a moment, then another moment. Then he pulled up a holographic display and began scrolling through what appeared to be the Academy's complete regulatory documentation, which was apparently longer than most species' entire written histories. Jake waited patiently. He'd already read the relevant sections. Twice. "This is insane," Threll finally muttered. "Is that a no?" Jake asked. The commander's compound eyes somehow managed to convey the exact expression of someone who'd just realized they were going to have a very long semester. "The rules," Threll said, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd just lost an argument with bureaucracy itself, "specify that students must utilize a bladed weapon of personal choice, subject to, and I am reading this directly, subject to cultural combat traditions and available technology standards." "See?" Jake said, Cultural combat traditions. This is super cultural. We've got songs about swords and everything. The spirit of the rule clearly implies, Commander, with respect, I'm not really a spirit of the rule kind of guy. I'm more of a letter of the rule enthusiast. Sarthak was practically vibrating with amusement. Oh please, let the human keep his antique. It will make his failure more entertaining. My people were mastering plasma dynamics when his ancestors were banging rocks together. Actually, Jake said conversationally, when your people were mastering plasma dynamics, my ancestors were already really good at the whole sword thing. We had like 1,000 years of dedicated practice in efficiently turning each other into conceptual art. It was kind of our whole deal. Xig's translator rendered what might have been a laugh. You cannot score points with a non-calibrated weapon. The holographic matrix will not register your strikes. Ah, well, that's the beautiful part, Jake said. I don't need the holographic matrix. If I hit you with this, trust me, you'll know. The insectoid's antennae recoiled. That seems suboptimal for my continued structural integrity. Which is why you'll be motivated to not get hit, Jake replied with a smile that was probably too cheerful given the context. Really raises the stakes, you know? Makes it exciting. Threll was scrolling through more documentation, his multiple arms working several screens at once. There is a precedent clause here that I deeply regret discovering. Section 447, subsection 12. Students may petition to use traditional weapons if they can demonstrate cultural significance and provide adequate liability waivers for all participants. I brought liability waivers, Jake announced, producing a data pad from his bag with the enthusiasm of a kid showing off a perfect report card. Had them drawn up last week. Very thorough. Covers dismemberment, psychological trauma, and something the lawyer called aggressive medieval energy. Everyone signs, everyone's protected, everyone has a great time learning about Earth's rich heritage of hitting things with sharp metal. This is absurd, Norval chimed in. Their crystalline structure refracting light in what the translator interpreted as indignation. The Academy has maintained safety standards for 3 centuries. And I'm not violating any of them, Jake pointed out. Just following the rules as written, which is what we're supposed to do at an elite educational institution, right? Follow the rules? Commander Threll looked like he was calculating how much of his pension he'd lose if he just walked out right now. The tournament structure remains unchanged. 16 students. Single elimination bracket. Matches continue until a clear victor is established through either scoring matrix compliance or opponent concession. Works for me, Jake said. If any student is seriously injured, they won't be, Jake interrupted. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm just trying to win at swords, which is something my species has been doing for literally ages. We've got the technique down. Very controlled. Mostly controlled. Like, 70% controlled. Sarthak stepped forward, his training saber humming to life with that distinctive energy weapon sound that probably tested really well with focus groups. I will volunteer to face the human first. Someone must demonstrate the futility of his primitive approach. Wow, volunteering already? Jake said. That's really brave of you, Sass. Respectable. It is Sarthak, and you will learn to pronounce it properly while you are lying on the floor wondering where your confidence went. Sure. Hey, Commander, how sharp are those training sabers supposed to be? Like, on a scale of butter knife to angry bee? Threll's mandibles clicked rapidly. They are holographic cutting fields calibrated to register contact without causing damage. They have the physical resistance of a solid blade but cannot actually cut tissue. Neat, Jake said, running his thumb along the edge of his longsword, which definitely could cut tissue and was absolutely doing so right now based on the thin line of red appearing on his skin. Mine's a bit different. Yes, we've established that your weapon is functionally homicidal, Threll said. Sarthak, if you are certain, I am certain I will enjoy this, the reptilian said. Jake secured his grip on the bisgrass, longsword's handle, feeling the familiar weight distribution his grandfather had taught him about. 3 pounds of tempered steel, perfectly balanced, designed by people who really needed their swords to work on the first try because there usually wasn't a second try. Around the room, the other students were exchanging glances that ranged from horrified to morbidly curious. Someone was probably already setting up betting pools. All right, Jake said. Let's see if 3,000 years of metallurgical tradition can hang with holographic future magic. Threll pulled up a holographic waiver form. Everyone signs. Now. And may the first ones have mercy on my career. The liability waiver signing took approximately 20 minutes, which Jake felt was reasonable given that several students needed to consult with their legal representatives across multiple star systems. Apparently, I acknowledged that a human might accidentally introduce my internal organs to external reality, required some careful consideration in various legal frameworks. This document is 17 pages long, Gzicht complained, their compound eyes scanning the text at speeds that made Jake's head hurt. Yeah, my lawyer was very thorough, Jake said. She got really into it after I explained medieval combat. Started asking questions about mortality rates and historical wound patterns. Pretty sure she's writing a paper about it. Sarthak signed without reading, which Jake respected from a confidence standpoint but questioned from a self-preservation standpoint. The first match, Threll announced with all the enthusiasm of someone announcing their own execution, will be human Jake Hendricks versus... Actually, you know what? Let us reconsider the bracket arrangement. Versus me, Sarthak interrupted. We established this. Right. Yes. The volunteer. How noble. Threll's antennae drooped. Standard dueling circle. First to 3 points or first concession. Hendricks. Given your weapons. Non-standard nature. A point will be awarded for any strike that would have been scored by the holographic matrix if your weapon was, not capable of actual murder. So basically hit him anywhere that would count? Jake asked. Without actually hitting him, Threll stressed. Controlled strikes. Demonstrated technique. We are simulating combat, not conducting it. Got it. Simulated violence. Very civilized. They took their positions in the dueling circle, which was about 20 feet in diameter and lit from below with some kind of energy field that probably cost more than Jake's entire college education. Sarthak moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his training saber held in a guard position that looked both alien and practiced. Jake held his longsword in a standard German longsword guard, point angled toward Sarthak, weight balanced. His grandfather would have been proud. Or horrified. Possibly both. Begin, Threll said, sounding like he deeply regretted every life choice that had led to this moment. Sarthak struck immediately, his enhanced reflexes living up to their reputation. The training saber came in fast, a probing thrust aimed at Jake's center mass. It was good technique, the kind of strike that would score easy points against a conventional opponent. Jake rotated his blade, caught the training saber against the flat, and redirected it past his shoulder with a movement that was approximately 600 years old and still extremely effective. Huh, Jake said. You're fast. You have not seen fast. Sarthak hissed, following up with a combination that came from 3 different angles in what seemed like the same second. Jake gave ground, parrying each strike with minimal movement. The longsword rang against the energy field of the training saber with a sound that was probably going to haunt Threll's dreams. Each contact sent little holographic sparks into the air, which was admittedly pretty cool. Point to Sarthak, Threll called out, and Jake realized with some embarrassment that while he'd been busy being impressed with the special effects, Sarthak had tagged his shoulder. Okay, that's fair, Jake admitted. I got distracted by the sparkles. Your primitive reflexes cannot match reptilian combat speed, Sarthak said, circling. Concede now and save yourself further embarrassment. Yeah, about that, Jake said, and then did something his longsword instructor had called Mordhau, which was a fancy German word for flipping your sword around and using it like a very aggressive hammer. Sarthak's eyes widened as 3 feet of steel reversed direction in Jake's hands, the crossguard suddenly coming at him like a particularly medieval fist. He blocked instinctively with his training saber, which worked great except that Jake wasn't actually trying to hit the saber. The pommel, the weighted metal ball at the end of the sword's handle, tapped Sarthak's chest plate with a gentle thunk that somehow conveyed significant threat. Silence. Did he just... Gzik started. He used the wrong end, Norval said, their crystalline structure flickering with confusion. Point to Hendricks, Threll said weakly. And please explain what in the name of the first ones that was. Pommel strike, Jake said, flipping the sword back to normal grip like it was the most natural thing in the world. Super common technique. You can also unscrew the pommel and throw it at people as a distraction, but that seemed excessive for a friendly match. You can what? Multiple voices said simultaneously. End them rightly, Jake said with a shrug. It's a whole thing. Very historical. Sarthak was staring at his chest plate where the pommel had made contact. That is not proper sword technique. I mean, it absolutely is, though, Jake replied. Just not the kind you've studied. Which is kind of my whole advantage here, Sass. You've trained against energy weapons and modern combat forms. I've trained against a weapon system designed by people who were really motivated to not die in extremely personal combat. The match resumed. Sarthak was more cautious now, clearly recalculating his approach. He feinted high, struck low, used his tail for balance in ways that would have been illegal in any Earth-based fencing but were apparently fine here. Jake defended, looking for openings. The longsword had reach and leverage that the training saber couldn't quite match. When Sarthak committed to a lunge, Jake sidestepped and brought the flat of his blade against the reptilian's extended arm. Not hard, just enough. Point to Hendrix, Threll announced. 2-1. The crowd of students was pressing closer to the circle now, their earlier mockery replaced with what might have been actual interest, or morbid curiosity. Jake wasn't picky about his audience engagement. Sarthak's technique evolved. He started using more footwork, more distance management. He scored another point with a quick strike that Jake simply didn't see coming. 2-2. Okay, you're definitely good at this, Jake admitted. I am trained by masters, Sarthak replied. Yeah, but were your masters trained by people who might get stabbed by the student if they taught wrong? Because that really focuses the curriculum. The final point came down to patience. Sarthak pressed an attack, looking for the decisive strike. Jake waited, controlled his distance, and when the training saber overextended by just inches, he stepped in closer than any energy weapon was designed to work, and placed his blade against Sarthak's neck. Not cutting, not even pressing. Just there. The longsword's edge was cold against scales. Point and match to Hendrix, Threll said quietly. Jake stepped back immediately, lowering his blade. Good match. You're scary fast. Sarthak was very still. His throat worked. You could have. But I didn't, Jake said. That's kind of the whole point of control. This thing, he gestured. With a longsword, it demands respect. From me, from my opponent, from everyone watching. You can't phone it in with a real blade. Around the circle, Jake was pretty sure he could hear the sound of several species simultaneously reconsidering their assumptions about humans. Commander Threll's antennae were doing something complicated. Next match will be after a 15-minute break, during which I will be filing approximately 73 incident reports and questioning my career trajectory. Want me to put the sword away? Jake offered. Absolutely not, Threll said. If I am suffering through this semester, everyone is suffering through this semester. Solidarity through shared trauma. Jake grinned. That's the spirit, Commander. That is not the spirit I intended to convey, but here we are nonetheless. By the next day, Jake's second match had an audience. Not just his classmates, but students from other courses, faculty members who definitely should have been teaching their own classes, and what appeared to be a news drone from the station's media network hovering near the ceiling. Is that thing recording? Jake asked, pointing at the drone. Station-wide broadcast. Threll confirmed miserably. Apparently you have become viral content. The humans say trending. I say professionally devastating. What's the title? Primitive Death Monkey terrorizes elite academy with ancestral murder stick. Xigt supplied helpfully. That's actually pretty catchy, Jake admitted. His second opponent was a being named Drelch, who looked like someone had given an octopus both military training and severe anger management issues. Drelch had 6 tentacles, each one capable of independent weapon manipulation, which meant he could theoretically attack from 6 directions simultaneously with 6 training sabers. This seems unfair, Jake observed. You brought a sharpened weapon to an academy that assumed basic sanity from its students. Drelch gurgled through his. Translator, we are beyond fairness. The match lasted approximately 90 seconds. Drelch came at Jake like a very organized tornado, all 6 sabers moving in patterns that should have been impossible to defend against. And they would have been, except that Jake had learned longsword from an instructor who believed that if you weren't occasionally facing multiple opponents in practice, you weren't really trying. Plus, 6 sabers meant 6 different timing patterns to track. Jake just had 1 blade, which meant 1 decision tree. Simpler, more focused. When you have 1 sword, you get really good with that sword. Jake won 3-1, primarily by using the longsword's crossguard to bind 2 of Drelch's sabers at once, and then very politely tapping the octopoid's center mass with his pommel again. He did the backwards thing again, someone in the crowd muttered. Why does he keep using the wrong end? Another voice asked. I think that might be the right end, Norval said thoughtfully. I am detecting a pattern in human weapon design that suggests deliberate multifunctionality. Match 3 was against a telepathic blob named Quorm who had seemed like the perfect counter to Jake's strategy. Quorm could read surface thoughts, predict movements before they happened, and technically didn't have any organs that could be cut, which made the whole sharp sword thing less threatening. The match started with Quorm confidently announcing each of Jake's intended strikes before he made them. You will thrust at my center. You will feint left and strike right. You will attempt another of your pommel strikes. Yep, Jake agreed, doing exactly those things. This should not be working, Quorum burbled in confusion, absorbing the third point. I know what you are going to do. Sure, Jake said. But knowing and stopping are different things. I mean, you know gravity exists, right? Doesn't mean you can fly. That is a false equivalence. Is it, though? Jake tapped Quorum, again for the winning point. Because from here it seems pretty equivalent. The betting pools, Jake learned during lunch break, had him at 3-1 odds to make the finals. Sarthak was favored to win overall at even money, which made sense given that his only loss had been to the crazy human with the sword. You are disrupting the entire tournament structure, Threll informed Jake while reviewing match footage. Students are changing their techniques. Norval has started researching ancient human combat forms. Kujkat asked where one acquires sharpened metal weapons. I am concerned. Concerned they'll learn something useful? Jake asked. Concerned that I will have a station full of students armed with actual weapons next semester, Threll said. The insurance premiums alone would be catastrophic. Match 4 was against a cybernetically enhanced warrior named Troke, who had replaced 60% of his body with military-grade hardware. He moved with mechanical precision, his training saber integrated into a prosthetic arm that could strike at speeds that made Sarthak look sluggish. Your primitive weapon cannot match my reaction time, Troke stated. I have been upgraded. Yeah, I can see that, Jake said, studying his opponent. Must have cost a fortune. All those servos and neural links and stuff. 7 years of military service, Troke confirmed proudly. Cool, cool. My sword cost about $300 and a weekend with my grandpa. Guess we'll see which investment pays off better. The match was genuinely difficult. Troke's augmented reflexes weren't just fast, they were consistent. No fatigue, no hesitation, just pure mechanical efficiency. Jake lost the first 2 points, barely understanding what had happened. Then he started watching the servos. Machinery, no matter how advanced, had patterns, tells, a slight delay while motors adjusted torque, predictive algorithms that assumed conventional responses. Jake started doing unconventional things. He attacked while moving backwards. He struck while deliberately off balance. He used edge alignment that would have made his instructor weep but worked great for confusing computer-assisted targeting. 3-2. Jake's favor. Your technique is erratic, Trock said, almost offended. Yeah, that's kind of the point, Jake replied. You're predicting optimal movement patterns. I'm just doing whatever feels right. Turns out organic chaos beats digital precision sometimes. This seems like a design flaw in my augmentation suite. Maybe mention it in your next upgrade. Tell them to add a confusion algorithm or something. By match 5, the audience had grown to include what appeared to be actual military observers from several stellar navies. Jake's opponent was a gaseous entity named Wisp, who could partially phase through matter, making physical strikes nearly impossible. Jake won by figuring out that while Wisp could phase through the blade, they couldn't phase through the air pressure displacement a fast-moving sword created. Every swing generated a wake that disrupted Wisp's cohesion enough to score points through sheer atmospheric violence. That should not work. Wisp whistled through their translator. I'm starting to think that's my tagline, Jake said. The semifinals matched Jake against Kujk, the insectoid with the impossible reflexes. The match was pure speed versus technique, and it went to 5 points each before Jake managed a win by doing something called a Zornhau, which was apparently a medieval German strike that came down at an angle no reasonable person would expect. Your weapon system is deeply illogical, Kujk chittered after the match, but they said it with what might have been respect. Yeah, that's what makes it work, Jake agreed. Which meant the finals would be a rematch. Jake versus Sarthak, human versus reptilian noble, ancient steel versus modern technology. The betting pools went insane, the crowd tripled, and Commander Threll filed for early retirement, though his request was denied on the grounds that the Academy needed someone to take responsibility for whatever happened next. I should have been an accountant, Threll muttered, watching the arena fill with spectators. Accounting is boring, though, Jake said, checking his sword's edge one more time. Boring sounds wonderful right now. Boring sounds like paradise. Boring sounds like a career that does not involve filing incident reports about humans treating educational programs like historical reenactments of their species' aggressive past. Look at the bright side, Commander. Which is? Jake grinned. This is definitely going to be memorable. That is not the comfort you think it is, human Hendrix. That is not comfort at all. The arena had been modified for the finals. Apparently, when your tournament becomes must-see entertainment across 7 star systems, the administration decides to lean into it. Holographic displays floated above the dueling circle showing multiple angles. Commentary was being provided in 47 languages. Someone had installed actual seating, which seemed optimistic about future tournaments until Jake remembered this was probably Threll's retirement match regardless of the outcome. Sarthak entered from the opposite side, and Jake had to admit the reptilian looked impressive. His scales had been polished to a mirror sheen, his combat armor was ceremonial grade, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had spent the last week doing nothing but training for this specific moment. "You have had a fortunate run, human," Sarthak said as they took their positions. "But fortune ends when it meets preparation." "That's actually a pretty good line," Jake said. "You workshop that?" "My house has a public relations team." "Of course you do." Threll stood between them, his forearms raised for attention. The crowd noise dropped to something manageable. Final match of the Advanced Dueling Techniques Tournament. Standard rules apply. First to 5 points or concession. Contestants, present your weapons. Sarthak ignited his training saber with a dramatic flourish. The energy blade hummed at a frequency probably calibrated for maximum intimidation. Jake just held up his longsword, letting the overhead lights play along the steel. No special effects needed. 3 feet of polished metal that had survived 4 generations made its own statement. "This should be illegal," someone in the crowd muttered. "Right?" Someone else agreed. "Like, philosophically illegal." "Begin," Threll announced, then immediately retreated to what he probably considered a safe distance, which was approximately all the way across the arena. Sarthak didn't rush this time. He'd learned from their first match, had watched all of Jake's subsequent fights, had clearly studied every technique Jake had demonstrated. He circled, maintaining perfect distance, his training saber moving in small defensive patterns. "Smart," Jake acknowledged. "Make me come to you." "You have shown your techniques to the entire station," Sarthak replied. "I know your pommel strikes, your odd angles, your backwards blade work. You have no surprises left." "That's a bold assumption." Jake pressed forward, testing Sarthak's defense with a high cut. The reptilian parried cleanly, riposted with a strike that Jake barely redirected. They exchanged a flurry of blows, steel ringing against energy field, neither committing enough for a definitive point. Then Sarthak changed his pattern. Instead of meeting the longsword directly, he started using his superior speed to attack from angles where Jake's blade wasn't positioned. Tag the arm, retreat. Thrust at the leg, withdraw. Death by 1,000 holographic cuts. Point to Sarthak. 1-0. "You see?" the reptilian said. "I have adapted. Your weapon is powerful but slow to redirect. My saber can shift instantly." "Yeah, you're definitely fighting smarter," Jake agreed, resetting his guard. Another exchange. Sarthak was flowing now, using his tail for balance, incorporating spinning strikes that came from directions Jake's medieval instructors had never imagined, because they hadn't evolved tails. "Point to Sarthak. 2-0. The crowd was getting excited. The human was losing. The natural order was reasserting itself. Technology over tradition, evolution over history. Jake adjusted his grip and tried something from Italian longsword tradition instead of German. Different footwork, different timing. He scored a point by using a technique called a punta falsa, which was basically lying to your opponent with your point angle. 2-1. "Good," Sarthak said. "Make this interesting." They traded points. Sarthak used his speed. Jake used leverage and geometry. 3-2, Sarthak leading. Then 3-3 after Jake scored with a bind that trapped Sarthak's saber against his crossguard and let him tap the reptilian's shoulder with his pommel yet again. "That strike is becoming tiresome," Sarthak hissed. "Then stop falling for it," Jake suggested. 4-3, Sarthak. The reptilian had scored with a brilliant feint that Jake simply couldn't react to in time. One more point and it was over. Sarthak pressed his advantage, attacking with combinations that were honestly beautiful to watch. This wasn't just speed anymore, this was artistry. Every strike connected to the next, creating patterns that were as much dance as combat. Jake defended, giving ground, watching. There was a rhythm to it. Had to be. Every complex pattern had an underlying structure, a repeated element that made it work. There, a slight drop in the shoulder before the spinning strike. Sarthak's tells were tiny, nearly invisible, but they existed. The next time Jake saw that shoulder drop, he didn't defend. He attacked into it, using something called a master strike where you hit while being hit, except you hit first and harder and that somehow makes it okay. According to medieval logic that Jake had given up questioning years ago, his longsword's flat slapped against Sarthak's saber, redirecting it. His point extended, stopping precisely 1 inch from Sarthak's throat. "Point to Hendrix," Threll announced. 4-4. The arena was dead silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Sarthak stepped back slowly. His eyes were locked on the longsword's point, which hadn't wavered. That level of control. Yeah, Jake said quietly. That's the thing about training with real blades. You get really, really good at control. Because the alternative is you accidentally hurt someone you're practicing with, and that's not acceptable. They reset for the final point. Both fighters were breathing hard. Sarthak's scales were showing stress patterns. Jake's arms were burning from the sustained effort of controlling 3 pounds of steel with precision. 1 point, Sarthak said. Yep, the human with his primitive weapon versus the reptilian noble house champion. When you put it that way, it sounds like a bad movie, Jake said. It feels like a bad movie. Want to make it a good one? Sarthak's mouth opened in what might have been a smile or a threat display. Honestly, Jake wasn't sure and decided it didn't matter. Show me what else that primitive weapon can do, human. They met in the center of the circle. No more caution, no more testing. Sarthak unleashed everything he'd been holding back. Technique stacked on technique. Speed pushed to limits that probably violated several safety regulations. Jake responded with 600 years of European martial tradition condensed into movements his body knew better than breathing. High guards, low guards, ox guard, plow guard, wrath guard. Strikes from angles that medieval masters had proven worked against armor, against multiple opponents, against people who really, genuinely wanted you dead. The longsword moved through positions that were named after animals. And attitudes. Vomtag, Flug, Zornhut. Words and languages most of the galaxy had never heard, describing techniques most of the galaxy had never imagined. And then Jake saw it. The opening. Sarthak overcommitted to a strike, putting all his considerable speed into an attack that would have scored if it landed. Jake didn't defend. He stepped offline, literally moved off the line of attack, and let Sarthak's saber pass through empty air while his longsword came to rest against the reptilian side. Not cutting, not even pressing hard. Just there. Match to Hendrix, Threll announced, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. Final score, 5-4. The arena erupted. Half the crowd was cheering. The other half was apparently filing protests with the tournament committee. Several species were recalculating their entire understanding of human technological development. Jake lowered his sword and offered his free hand to Sarthak. Hell of a match. Sarthak stared at the offered hand, then at Jake's face, then back at the hand. You could have cut me. But I didn't. The entire match, you could have simply struck. Your weapon is not bound by holographic scoring matrices. You could have ignored all sport conventions and simply hit me with a sharpened blade. Yeah, Jake agreed. But that wouldn't have been a tournament. That would have been assault. There's a difference. Slowly, Sarthak took Jake's hand. His grip was firm, respectful. Your species is deeply strange. You're not wrong. We develop weapons that cannot truly harm, then fight with honor. Sarthak continued. You bring weapons that absolutely can harm, then fight with even greater honor. This is backwards. Maybe, Jake said, or maybe it makes sense. The more dangerous the tool, the more responsibility you have to use it right. That's kind of the whole point. Commander Threll approached, holding a ceremonial trophy that looked like it had been designed by committee and approved by people who had never actually seen a trophy. Human Jake Hendrix. By the rules of this tournament, which I have come to deeply regret ever writing, you are declared champion of Advanced Dueling Techniques 401. Thanks, Commander. It's been educational. That is certainly one word for it. Threll muttered. Other words include horrifying, unprecedented, and grounds for immediate curriculum revision. The trophy ceremony took about 20 minutes, which was 19 minutes longer than Jake wanted to stand around holding a weird crystal thing while cameras recorded him from every conceivable angle. Sarthak stood beside him on the second-place platform, looking dignified in defeat, which Jake appreciated because losing gracefully seemed harder than winning. Effective immediately. Threll announced to the assembled crowd and the 7-star systems watching, we are implementing what will be officially known as the Hendrix Protocols. All future dueling courses will require weapons to meet specific non-lethal standards. No sharpened blades, no actual munitions. No implements designed for genuine harm. That's fair, Jake said into his microphone. Additionally, Threll continued with visible satisfaction. Human Hendrix is hereby banned from all future tournament participation. Wait, what? You won. Congratulations. Never do this again. Threll's antennae somehow managed to convey smug victory despite being antennae. The rules now explicitly prohibit your entire approach to academic dueling. That seems like punishing success, Jake protested. That is ensuring my continued employment, Threll corrected. You are a championship winner and permanently restricted from competition. I believe your human sports call this retiring on top. The crowd found this hilarious, which Jake felt was unsupportive. After the ceremony, while Jake was carefully packing his longsword back into its duffel bag, Sarthak approached. Your family blade, 4. Who generations, you said? Yeah, Grandpa's grandpa brought it over from Germany. It's been through a lot. It has honor, Sarthak said simply. That is worth more than technology. Thanks, man. You fight really well, too. That speed is no joke. Perhaps next semester we could train together, the reptilian suggested. I would learn your ancient techniques. You would learn reptilian combat forms. Can't, Jake said apologetically. Banned from tournaments, remember? Training is not tournaments. You know what? That's an excellent point. Yeah, let's do that. They clasped hands again, the human and the reptilian, representing about 4 billion years of divergent evolution, finding common ground in the universal language of hitting things with metal objects. Jake was halfway to his quarters when his communication device chimed. Video call from Earth. He accepted, and his younger sister Emma's face appeared, grinning from the family home. Saw the match, Emma said. Very dramatic. Mom cried. Dad wouldn't stop yelling at the screen about your footwork. Tell him I know my back foot was too wide on the final exchange, Jake said. I got excited. Will do. Hey, so I got accepted. Jake's brain took a moment to process this. Accepted to what? Galactic Combat Academy, starting next semester. I'm majoring in ranged weapons technology. Emma's grin widened. Specializing in archery. Emma, no. Emma, yes. I've already got Grandma's English longbow packed. 65-pound draw weight. You would. Properly traditional. They're going to have rules against that now. Against sharpened blades, sure. Nobody said anything about projectile weapons. She waggled her eyebrows. I checked. Somewhere in the station, Jake could have sworn he heard Commander Threll scream. This is a terrible idea, Jake said. This is a family tradition now, Emma corrected. Hendrix versus Galactic civilization. We're 2 for 0 if you count your tournament, and that time Dad beat a crystalline merchant at poker. That's not how counting works. See you next semester, big brother. Try not to let your reputation as the sword guy overshadow my inevitable dominance as the arrow girl. She disconnected before Jake could form a coherent argument. He stood in the corridor, holding his duffel bag with its ancestral longsword, contemplating the chaos his sister was about to unleash on an academy that had just barely survived him. Then he started laughing. Because really, what else could you do? Behind him, a holographic bulletin board updated with next semester's course listings. Under Advanced Ranged Combat, a new note appeared in red text. Humans, please see administrator before registration. Bring complete equipment manifests. And a lawyer. Definitely bring a lawyer. Humanity, it seemed, was just getting started, and somewhere in his office, Commander Threll updated his resume.